We got some breaking news today. The coaching carousel continues in the National Football League. Earlier today, Adam Schefter tweeted, just in, Pete Carroll and the Raiders now have reached an agreement on a 3-year deal with the 4th-year team options. Sources tell ESPN another veteran, legendary coach has emerged. So first thing that struck me is Pete Carroll is back. And you look at that division and all the coaches, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh is the only coach in that division that doesn't have a Super Bowl championship. But Pete Carroll is a very interesting hire for the Raiders. I do think it is an upgrade to Antonio Pierce. He is a Super Bowl winning head coach. He is a known culture builder, but he's not Ben Johnson. And Ben Johnson was their guy. Tom Brady was rumored to be heavily involved in this coaching hiring process. And that's who the Raiders focused on early on. They wanted Ben Johnson. He ends up going to the Bears. And I do think, though, that this is a good move for the Raiders, because the Raiders are in a position where you don't have a quarterback right now. And I think you could use a stopgap transition level quarterback. And there's a guy out there that could be very available that has a great relationship now, once again, with Pete Carroll, and that is Russell Wilson. So if I'm the Raiders, I'm getting Russell Wilson in silver and black, and then I'm probably drafting someone like Jackson Dart, someone to really fill that spot where you don't need a quarterback to start in day one. And the Raiders can start playing football at at least competitive level once again. But I do like this hire. I won't give it an A, but I do think it's a solid B hire. It's a B hire. I think you're not going to see the Pete Carroll that we saw years ago, where he was the hottest coach in the National Football League, and you had him leading the Legion of Boom defense for the Seattle Seahawks. And that vaunted cover 3 style of defense that started to fail him towards the end, I think he's going to reinvent himself. I think that has to be the plan right now. But as of right now, give it a B. But I'm bringing in my man. You guys know him. You love him. He played D1 college football for the University of Connecticut, the great John Robinson IV. We're going to be breaking down all the playoff games today. But John, just initial reaction to the Raiders hiring Pete Carroll.
So I love the decision to go after a coach who's done it before. I like the fact that Pete Carroll has established himself, obviously winning a national championship at USC, winning a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. Now, I don't love them getting rid of Antonio Pierce. Think he deserved a little bit more of a shot. You really cannot win in this league without a quarterback. But I do agree. You need somebody who could build a culture there. I mean, the carousel of coaches that have coming in and out of that organization have been ridiculous. And I think with Tom Brady being the guy to go out there and pick a Pete Carroll, that means that there is some sort of plan in place. But I'm with you. I think there's a lot of consideration about what are they going to do at quarterback. I love the idea of going to get Jackson Dart. I'd even love even more if they traded up to the number 1 pick to get Shedeur Sanders. I think that would make headways, especially with how Shedeur has talked about his relationship with Brady and how he's inspired to be like him. So, I mean, I like the decision. I think you're trying to establish a winning culture there in Oakland. I'm just not 100% sure how it's going to work out. I definitely have to see who is going to be commanding that offense in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and that's the number one thing, too, is he's not an offensive head coach, right? And that really has been what the Raiders were trying to pursue. If you look at guys they interviewed, I mean, they were heavily involved with 7 other candidates. Your guy, Aaron Glenn, is someone that they interviewed and they were high on as well. But I do think that kind of where the Raiders are at from a brand name standpoint, a stability standpoint, he does bring that cachet. A lot of USC fans are Raiders fans, and they're happy about this today. But a lot of times when people go to Vegas, especially entertainers, it's, okay, I've had my career already peak, right? I mean, look, Usher is killing it in Vegas, but this isn't Usher when he was 8701 Usher and his heyday confessions Usher, right? I mean, that's where you go to Vegas when the career kind of is over, and then you kind of set those dates. But I do think, like anything else, it's going to be about who he ends up adding around him and who else does he hire. And right now they're saying that he is trying to retain Patrick Graham, their defensive coordinator. His contract is up, but they're going to try to retain him, and they're going to fill out the position with some of the guys that are currently there on the staff. Darrell Bevel, former defensive coordinator Gus Bradley could be in the mix. Nick Sorensen, his son Nate Carroll, I'm sure he'll try to get in the mix as well. And then Brian Schneider. So I think that you see a lot of these guys, though, it's like, man, you got to pry them away from coaching. Bill Belichick going to North Carolina, Pete Carroll. I mean, there was talk last January, he might even go to UCLA. I mean, there was some talk about that. So clearly he was not done. and energy wise, this guy feels like he's the youngest 73-year-old in coaching. So I do like that about him.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a lot of, when they say you retire, a lot of guys can't retire, Doug, because when they retire, like, what else is for them to do? What keeps a Pete Carroll awake at night, what keeps a Bill Belichick awake at night is going to coach. Like, coaching is what
100%.
ignites their fire. So I think this idea that, like, we have to push these guys out of the door because they're older, as long as they're able to evolve with the new landscape of what football is becoming on the collegiate and pro level, I do think they should still be allotted the opportunity to coach, especially with the resumes that a lot of these guys have.
That's the biggest thing. Now, are you on board with the idea of adding a Russell Wilson? Because I do think it'd be interesting to even add a Justin Fields. It'd make more sense to me.
I actually do not want to see a reunion between between Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. I am more inclined to see a Justin Fields in that position, a rookie quarterback. I think it's about really establishing a legitimate future in Las Vegas. I think the biggest issue with that organization has been they haven't had any type of consistent continuity. Even with Derek Carr at the helm for all those years, it was so streaky and up and down. It was one year they looked like a playoff team, another year they were abysmal. I think trying to have a level of consistency is huge for that team. And so because of that, I am all for them reaching for more of a future than a stopgap with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and I just texted with someone I know that covers the Raiders, and he believes that they'll bring in Russ and that those two have kind of buried the hatchet. Of course, they kind of had a nasty divorce, so I don't know who brought the flowers and the chocolates to who, but clearly they're on the same page once again. Another interesting thing we were talking about yesterday with the Jets hire is the relationship with the general manager, and that cannot be understated. It's the owner, general manager, coach dynamic that a lot of times determine how successful an organization is going to be. I mean, I cover the Rams, Les Snead, Sean McVay, and Stan Kroenke, they're in lockstep. When they wanted to trade for Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, they were about to go on a plane, and Stan Kroenke told them, "Do it. You got my full support." With what we see with Davis with the Raiders, a little bit more of a mom and pop thing, and I think too the $1 million question is the involvement of Tom Brady in this situation. So yeah, look, I think it's a good hire. It kind of makes them relevant once again. Having said that, though, you look at the list of names they also interviewed. You interviewed Aaron Glenn, Robert Saleh, Vance Joseph, Ron Rivera, Steve Spagnuolo, and you didn't go after any of those young offensive coaches. I mean, no Joe Brady, no Kellen Moore, no Liam Cohen. It almost feels like to me like the Raiders. Shout out to Chris Berman. The Raiders are almost stuck in a couple of generations ago when more teams are going with offensive-minded head coaches.
Yeah, I think a lot of these coaches it's assumed that like the head coach and the quarterback are like this pairing. And so you look at the offensive-minded coach, but you got to look at like your DeMeco Ryans of the world who are able to have success despite not being an offensive coach. It's really about who is Pete Carroll going to hire? Can you poach Bobby Slowick from the Texans and then groom him to be the next Las Vegas Raiders head coach? Maybe. But ultimately, if Pete Carroll can bring in a coordinator who understands offense and can get the most out of whoever they bring in at quarterback, it works. It's just about the pieces within the organization. It's about the staff and the continuity. All those things matter. So you can have a Pete Carroll as your head coach, but who is going to be calling those plays for your quarterback?
That's the number one thing. But I will say, like I said, that division, I cannot wait to see the first handshake between him and Harbaugh. I'll never forget when Harbaugh, Mr. Khaki Pants, tucking in the crew sweatshirt to the khaki pants is definitely a wardrobe decision. You're always looking fly. I mean, I don't think you would advise of that doing that. What thoughts on just tucking the sweatshirt to the khakis?
I mean, it's a little much for me. I'm more of a quarter zip windbreaker type of guy when I like my coat from the coaches. But listen, give Pete Carroll a lot of credit for his Air Monarchs, man. He never puts them away.
Yeah, I know. I remember hearing a story that they tried to give him some more updated Nikes, but his feet were too wide. But yeah, I cannot wait to see that first handshake between Harbaugh and Pete Carroll. Remember the one when they were at USC? He's like, "What's your deal?" And they were upset with each other. But